stand it when people wear pajama pants in public? Now, before I get into all that, it's important for you all to know that here at URI, I double majored in textiles, fashion merchandising, and design and philosophy. Now, I know from experience that many of you right now are thinking some variation of, what is she going to do with that? What's a fashion designing philosopher anyway? Well, I still can't tell you what I'm going to do with what I've studied in terms of getting a job. But what I'm here today to share with you is what I can do with what I've studied on a daily basis. And the best way I know how to do that is with a story. At the top of campus, there's a coffee shop named Bagels. And sometimes when I'm craving caffeine, which is all the time, I'll go there for a coffee. On one of these days, there was a particularly long line. So I did what anyone with a design background does. I look at stuff. And particularly for me, I look at clothing. And as I gaze out over a sea of sorority letters and sweatshirts, leggings and jeans, that's when I see her. She's been standing in front of me this entire time. A girl my age wearing pajama pants. It's fuzzy fleece staring me right in the face in loud alternating stripes of gray and black. Something about it makes my skin crawl, makes a shiver go up my spine. A voice inside my head screams, wrong. Because the designer inside of me will admit it. I cannot stand it when people wear pajama pants in public. But in the next moment, my background in philosophy revs up like an engine and starts a conversation of sorts. A philosopher and a designer materialize on each one of my shoulders. The philosopher looks to the designer and says, but why can't you stand it when people wear pajama pants in public? The designer says, it looks lazy. The philosopher is not satisfied with that answer. You see, people tend to think of the philosopher as the one with all the answers, the old, wise one. But really, I think the true spirit of a philosopher is that of a little kid who looks up at his or her mom and dad and says, but why? But why? But why? Until they get an answer that's solid, that they can hold on to because they've seen it in other places, other situations. So the philosopher questions her further. But why does it make her look lazy? The designer gets frustrated and says, because you're not supposed to wear pajama pants in public, you're supposed to wear them when you're at home or when you're sleeping. The philosopher smiles and says, aha, here is something for us to work with. Where do these little rules come from in the first place? Supposed to do this here, not supposed to do that there. Well, according to German philosopher Martin Heidegger, we exist in worlds that themselves exist almost within and on top of this earthly plane of existence that our physical bodies occupy, the material world. And they're only here because humans are here to create them, through our innate need to give context to the things that surround us. This is the hallmark of our species. This is how cultures are formed, how Heidegger's worlds are formed. People within proximity of each other, agreeing on the meaning of shared experience. Pants that we call pajamas, that are meant for sleeping, belong to the world of sleeping, which itself is a greater world of relaxation, comfort. It's a place where we explore our privacy, our personal space. It's a place where we enter a state of total vulnerability that we do not carry with us to the public world, the world of public interaction. And that is your problem with the pajama pants in public, says the philosopher. Not what they are, but what they mean. Luckily, Heidegger helps us with a way out of this problem. He says that because we create contextual worlds out of the material world that we live in, every single thing on this planet truly exists on a spectrum. To explain this concept, he uses the example of a statue of Apollo, the Greek god of sunlight, prophecy, and music. On one end of the spectrum, the statue is simply a piece of granite and all of the characteristics that make up granite. It's something that's hard. It's something that's heavy. It's something that's rough. But on the other end of the spectrum, the statue is a shared belief. Its physical characteristics fall away as those who understand it to be Apollo and all the things he represents and presides over look at it. On one end of the spectrum,
the statue is a piece of rock. On the other end of the spectrum, the statue is a piece of a story. Now, the pants the girl was wearing in front of me look as if they're made of an imitation fleece, which itself is 100% polyester fabric, which is a synthetic petroleum-based fiber. When cut into pajama pants with a straight leg and a drawstring waist, these pants are just soft. They're lightweight, they're breathable, they're fuzzy. But when someone wears them and they belong to the world of sleeping, they become something that facilitates the ability to sleep, the ability to relax, the ability to become totally vulnerable. The philosopher looks at the designer and says, "Are you seeing it the way I'm seeing it?" The designer says, "I guess, but how is this going to help us?" It's going to help us because understanding how things exist on a spectrum gives us alternate ways of viewing them, and we get to decide how we look at them. If we decide the girl in front of us is wearing pajama pants, our thought process tells us that pajama pants belong to the world of sleeping. And since she's not in that world while wearing them, she's behaving wrongly. And that is the shiver that went up your spine, says the philosopher, her failure to comply with what the pants mean. However, we could also decide that the girl in front of us is wearing pants cut with a straight leg and a drawstring waist, made out of a fabric that's synthetic and is soft, that's flexible, that's lightweight, that's breathable. We could look at it in its material. And once we do that, the girl in front of us is no longer wrong because in fact, we have something in common. Because the leggings that you're wearing right now are made of synthetic fibers. You own jeans that are made with polyester, the synthetic fiber. And I know for a fact that right now, hanging at home in your closet are a pair of pants with a straight leg, a drawstring waist, made of synthetic fibers that you yourself have worn in public because they've been named palazzo pants, which are defined as belonging to the world of public interaction, the world that we dress up for and present ourselves. All of this is to say, we can take two pieces of the same matter, manipulate them in slightly different ways, give them two different names and meanings, and they get to go on to belong to two different worlds and do two entirely different things, all because we decided to be so. Now, some of you may be thinking, what good is any of this? This girl spent 6 years working towards 2 undergraduate degrees and had her parents pay for 10 semesters of college tuition, also she could talk to herself about pants while waiting in line for a coffee. Why does any of this matter? It matters because I can take the logic from this one instance to conclude something way more fundamental. We are living right now in a time that's extremely polarized. We have many, many groups coming forward and demanding the respect they want and the respect they deserve. These are groups that have been oppressed for years, that haven't been acknowledged as existing or as deserving to exist, because they belong to worlds that are different from the ones we've been conditioned to think are the right or correct ones, the ones that have prevailed through our culture and society most dominantly. We are contextual beings. The stories we've been told about the world we belong to follow us, long after we know that logically they're outdated or they're just misconceived. Part of the reason being we still live in a material world and we're surrounded by things that have been assigned meaning according to prevailing rights and wrongs of past times. We cannot change the way the material world looks quickly enough to accommodate the pace with which we want to, and we know that we need to change our viewpoints. We want to give each other respect, but we don't always know how. We want to look at each other, free of deep-rooted meanings and feelings. But I don't think we're taught how to do that, only that it's something we should be doing. Looking at a girl wearing pajama pants and thinking she is wrong is like a knot that exists in the fabric of my own perception, a knot of conditioned thought about what is right and what's acceptable. But if I can untangle that knot using logic and thought to weave a new understanding of a girl who's wearing pants that are virtually the same as mine, then I've sown tolerance. And if I can do that, then I can look at a homosexual man or woman, and rather than seeing someone who loves another in a way that's disharmonious with how I experience love, I can see someone who wants to love and be loved back, free of prejudice and discrimination from bystanders, which is the same way that I want to be loved. Again, I've untangled the knot, and I've sown tolerance into the fabric of my perception. I'm training myself to see that even though we go on to belong to different worlds, we immerse ourselves in different contextual experiences, we are made of the same thing from the start, the same matter, the same material. We're human beings. In the end, the designer looks to the philosopher and says, I understand why I was bothered now and why I don't have to be. Thank you for that. Philosopher says, you're welcome. That's what I'm here for. They evaporate off my shoulders, and the girl in front of me in line is handed a coffee in a to-go bag. I smile at her as she leaves. She looks pretty comfortable. How many knots of conditioned thought did you encounter throughout your day-to-day? Or the day before that? Things that made you uncomfortable and think, wrong. How many of those knots can you untangle? Thank you.